Dallas Mayor Eric Johnson, thank you so much, and welcome back to Eye on Politics.
Great to be here. Thanks, Jack.
So on Thursday, there will be a joint meeting of two committees that you called for to take a look at whether to take part in this ICE 287G program and perhaps take the $25 million offered by the Trump administration. Dallas Police Chief Como said no, but you came back and said this should be considered. So are you going to attend this meeting yourself? And what is your message to Chief Como, council members, and the public?
I typically don't attend committee meetings myself. It's very rare that I do that, so I probably won't attend this one. I'll definitely be paying attention to what happens. But what I will tell you is this, Jack. I had questions about the reporting I'd heard about a $25 million offer being made to ICE. I still have not had any confirmation of that number. So you said the Trump administration offered $25 million. I don't know that to be the case. All I know is what has been reported. So what I asked for was to have a discussion in public, because I think that's very important. I think the public needs to understand, well, first of all, I think there's been some discussion about the 287G program. I've heard wildly different things about what the program does and how it operates. So I'd like to hear from ICE about how the program actually works. But then more importantly than that even is, as a result of the big beautiful bill, there's now a funding stream that's new, that's associated with the program to induce participation in the program. And I'd like to understand how that works, because I've not been told any details about that. So the purpose of this meeting is to really get the facts. And I think that's really, really important. And I think it's important that policymakers, the city council specifically, of which I'm a part, actually has an opportunity to hear those facts and to weigh in on this topic. I totally respect the chief of police and his authority to make these types of decisions. And so I'm not questioning that. But I do think when you're talking about if it is in fact $25 million, that's nothing to sneeze at. That's a significant amount of money for a police department that is trying to hire more officers and that could use those resources. So I want to know point blank, Jack, I'll just say it, if there was an offer made, what were the terms? I want to know what they were asking the Dallas Police Department to do to receive that money. And I would just like the public to be aware of what the terms of this offer were, if there was in fact an offer made. I'm just not privy to the details of this offer.
Well, I mentioned it because you referred to this wide reporting of the $25 million
correct.
In your note to council members. And you also said that this is a policy, which you just said before. Did you speak to the chief after he said no? And did you was this a question in your mind that he overstepped his authority?
No, I don't know that I would describe anything he's done as an overstepping of his authority. Because I think the way our system of government works is the police chief gets to make those decisions, I guess, in consultation with the city manager, if anyone, because he reports directly to her. And so I took the reporting and what the chief said, I took him at his word. I believe that what he's saying is true, but I would like to understand what went into that decision. So I'm not questioning whether or not he had the authority to make the decision, but I do think when we're talking about $25 million, the public would benefit from understanding what went into that decision. And again, like I said, I do think we need to understand what this program and this funding stream, which is new, is asking of police departments in order to receive it. Because I don't think we are in a position, and I don't think we ever should, just sort of flippantly turn our nose up at $25 million if it's something that we can do that allows us to still stay on our mission of reducing violent crime in the city, which we're doing a great job of. And I want to commend the chief. He's actually doing a fine job of leading this department. But I just think there are too many unanswered questions that were raised by his own public statement that I wanted to get to the bottom of. And rather than speculate about it and guess, and I just said, let's just have a meeting and let him explain what his decision was based on, and let ICE explain how the program actually works. So let's end all the rumors and just get to the bottom of it.
So you're keeping an open mind?
Of course.
You're
absolutely.
not supporting it one way or the other just yet?
No, I'm going to make my decision about how I feel about our not participating in this program, or if the council decided to participate in it. Either way, I would make my decision based on what I heard in this meeting. I want to hear from ICE, and I want to hear from the chief, and I want to understand what exactly it is that we are being asked to do by ICE. Now, if we're being asked to do anything at all.
Now, the chief said in a letter about his commitment to public safety, and he explains his thinking on why he opposed joining this program. He said, I made the decision not to take part in 287G. Implementing this program would reassign officers under federal oversight, which could negatively impact response times and erode the public trust that our department has worked diligently to build. Our priorities remain clear: ensuring the safety of Dallas residents, improving response times, enhancing departmental efficiency, and strengthening our recruitment and hiring efforts. And he said this would, if joining this program would require an operation change away from these goals, making the city less safe. How do you respond to that?
Well, I will tell you this, Jack, and thus the need for a hearing. I have all the respect in the world for our chief and his expertise, and I have always had a respectful sort of relationship with our law enforcement leadership, going back to every chief I've worked with as mayor. I think that's really important. That the mayor is not the police chief, and the mayor, at least this mayor, is not a public safety expert, although I care about it more than any other issue. But I think it's really important that folks understand that that is not what I have been told, and I think many people have been told are the requirements of participating in this 287G program with this funding source that's now been added by the Big Beautiful Bill. I think there's conflicting information out there about exactly what the Dallas Police Department would be required to do to receive these funds. And so I think we need to have the public discussion, not a bunch of discussions between individual people behind closed doors, but in public and with all the folks there who are the experts in this, chief included, ICE included, to tell us what is required of the Dallas Police Department to receive this money, if it is in fact $25 million. We'll just go with that number because it's been thrown out there.
Sure.
But I would like to understand if it does require an operational shift, because I have received communication from ICE. I mean, I've seen emails from them that say that their whole purpose in expanding this program, or at least the resources available to it, is to get more participation without taking local police departments off of their local priorities and their local mission, and without impeding their ability to do their jobs. In other words, to use almost their exact words, to actually assist them in the ordinary course of these law enforcement agencies doing their daily work. So I've heard the exact opposite, that it's going to require an operational shift and for the Dallas Police Department to be doing something that's not their mission to be able to participate in this program. So let's just get to the bottom of it and find out what the facts are.
And what are some of the concerns that you have? In other words, is there something, if you find out that this program would require the police department to focus more on immigration and take them away, officers away from their beats, from working with the community, prevent crimes, et cetera, and respond to them, is that where you would draw the line and say, all right, Chief, you're right, I agree with you on this?
I think that is the exact right question, and that is exactly the fulcrum of this for me. I would not be supportive of anything that took us away from our mission of reducing violent crime in our city. I think we have work to do there, important work to do there. It's the number one priority of the department. It's my number one priority. And I would not support and be in favor of us having our focus taken away from that. But I don't know that that's the case. I don't know that that would be required of us to do that, to participate in the program. So I absolutely would be in favor of us being able to do what we've been doing very successfully, but with $25 million, if that's in fact what's on the table, of additional resources to be able to hire more officers. So what I would definitely like to learn, Jack, from this hearing is whether or not we could do what we've been doing, carrying on with business as usual, which has been implied, if not explicitly stated in communication from ICE. If we could continue doing what we've been doing, but with $25 more million in our pocket of reimbursement, essentially, then I'd be for that. But I would not be in favor of taking the local discretion away from our police chief and shifting our focus from violent crime reduction to immigration enforcement, if that's what would be required. But I don't know that. And I think people should have a little more humility all across the spectrum on this issue. It's not pretending like they know if they haven't actually heard this directly from ICE or the police chief in an open forum like we're going to have this week.
Lots of topics to discuss,
Yeah.
and as you
That's
know,
a good one. That's important. I think it's so important, Jack, that the public know what's going on here. That's why I wanted to have the meeting.
Yeah, and let me ask you about this other debate that's really popped up in the last several weeks, and that is the future of Dallas City Hall. And the report that happened yesterday came out that the city could have to spend nearly $600 million to get this building in shape and maintain it and rehabilitate it, et cetera. Where are you on this?
Well, here's where I've been up to now, and I'm still in this phase. And there's a common theme here in terms of how I like to govern. Maybe fault my education in public affairs. I like to get the facts first, and then make an informed policy decision. I'm not a shoot, ready, aim guy. Like, I really do believe that what you should do is figure out what's what, figure out what the facts are, get straight what is actually at stake and what's going on, and then making a decision. So this is a situation where I know we have issues because I work in the building every day with City Hall. And anyone who's ever worked here knows that. Anyone who's ever visited the place on a regular basis knows that there are serious issues. The question is, when are we going to actually address those issues and how? And I decided that on my watch, we weren't going to kick the can down the road anymore, that we were going to have, again, the discussion that we need to have about the future of City Hall. So I convened a committee, which is actually a committee that we've always had, the finance committee, and it's charged with looking into what is the right thing to do from a fiscal standpoint, from a resource allocation standpoint with City Hall and other buildings too, but we need to start here. And so that's what I did. I formed a committee and I gave them the instruction to look into the options for City Hall. So everything is on the table as far as I know. I mean, everything from up to $600 million worth of repairs, and how to fund that, it would be something we'd have to think through. Annual budgets and bond packages and things like that, or some sort of status quo approach where we just fix things as they break, which is very expensive, or an alternative City Hall, moving elsewhere. I think those all need to be discussed. I'll make a decision about where I stand on it once we get all of the facts, but I will tell you this, Jack. One of the things I have heard, and I just want to sort of put out there, is that I don't think we can have this approach. And I think if we were, going forward, I would recommend that we not necessarily use a famous architect to build a building that people actually have to use every day and has to have a practical purpose, because the fact that the architect is famous and built the building has become an argument in some people's minds for why you can't possibly ever move away from it or level it or anything else. And I just don't think that can be the case with a building that has to serve a public function, meaning there has to be a serious discussion about whether or not it actually makes sense to maintain the building, and it can't all revolve around the fact that IMPay is the person who designed the building. I think that's a factor, but it can't be the deciding factor in this. That's my honest opinion.
Well, there's a preservation board that's trying to make this much more difficult to actually, tear down the building, right?
Yeah.
To save it. But you're not opposed to that idea of tearing down the building, if I hear you correctly?
No, what I'm saying is, in essence, once I have all the facts, I'll weigh in on what I think we ought to do, but it'll be a council decision, and I do think all those options should be on the table, and I would not take off the table City Hall being elsewhere. I'm just going to be very blunt with you, Jack. The building has some serious issues, and if those numbers are correct, that's something we really have to think about. We can't just take off the table the possibility of moving from City Hall because a famous architect designed the building. I think, again, in the future, let's pick a good architect, but not necessarily a famous one, so that this doesn't become its own self-proving argument as to why you can't ever do something different.
You keep talking about the building's needs. What's the strangest thing you've seen around here?
Gosh, I feel like every other week we get an email about some part of the building we can't use because it's flooded. It's got serious water penetration issues and leak issues. The plumbing issues in just in our office alone are not good. And then, frankly, it's the most energy inefficient building I've ever worked in on a regular basis, ever visited on a regular basis. It's impossible to maintain the temperature in this building. It's either freezing cold or it's burning hot at all the wrong times of the year. It's the opposite of what you want it to be. It's not a great place to work, to be honest with you, Jack, in terms of the actual ergonomics and the physical structure for getting the job done of representing the people or working for the people. So, I look at it from a practical standpoint. It's great that it was designed by someone famous, but it's not a great building to work in, period.
And some council members say, maybe this would be great land for the Dallas Mavericks, new arena, etc. What do you say to that?
Maybe.
You're open to that?
Look, I'm open to that discussion if we get to that point. But at this point, this question is about, again, I have a committee on sports retention and professional sports and all. Didn't go there. This is an issue about financial, fiscal responsibility and being a good steward of the taxpayers' dollars. And right now, we have a real serious decision to make about whether or not we want to put $600 million into trying to stabilize this building, or we want to move on from it. And that's the discussion we need to have. Any discussion about the Mavericks or anybody else purchasing this land would need to happen at that point. I would think that this land would go to the highest and best use if it were ever to be put on the up for sale or something like that. That's what I would think.
I have one other question on this topic, and then I want to talk to you about the Mavericks. So the city let maintenance go on this building, right? I mean, I think that's a fact, because why else would you have all this? And my question to you is this: given that this building has not been kept up over decades, given the fact that the city has, that permitting building, which I think most people would say is a debacle, because it was never, it's unusable, and the city spent money on this, couldn't get permits on it. Do you trust the city to actually get this building back into its proper shape?
I think that's a fair question, to be honest with you, Jack. And I think my answer to that would be, I think to say that the maintenance on the building has sort of been let go, I can't necessarily speak to what happened before I got here, but I do think this. There is a such thing as just, I don't want to call this building I don't know what the right phrase to use is to describe this, but I'm not sure anybody could really maintain this building very well without spending a really astronomical amount of money. I just don't think it is designed very well for public use for the purpose of being a workplace. It's interesting architecturally, but it's a tough building. It's a lot of concrete and glass, and it's tough. So I don't know if City Hall is the best example of sort of the city's inability to do well with maintaining its real estate. I think maybe the permitting office you're talking about is a better example, but certainly it's something that has to be factored into the decision. I mean, I think the city council has to make a decision about whether or not this is something we want to take on or something we would like to get out of. But I think that decision is imminent. We're going to have to make that decision very soon. But again, I think this is a tough building. I mean, again, I work here every single day, and it's just that the parking garage even has issues. I mean, it's a lot.
So let's talk about the Dallas Mavericks, the Dallas Stars. They may leave the city. Who knows? We'll see what happens. What are you doing specifically to try to keep them here and prevent them from leaving Dallas?
Well, let me say first of all, I don't think we've ever had a mayor in the history of this city, or even a city council and city leadership and the city manager's office, that's paid more attention to and had more hands-on approach to professional sports. In fact, we have a committee with that as its name for a reason. I mean, retaining these sports teams is important. And so what I'm doing personally is trying to make sure that both the Mavericks and the Stars in this case, but we talked to other sports teams as well, and we've recruited successfully some new ones to the city. I want them to know that we want them here. I want them to know that we are not a city that's sort of indifferent to sports. We love our sports team. We're sort of a sports crazy city, and I'm a sports fan myself. But it's a bigger issue than that, and I think that's probably the most important thing for the public to understand is that at the end of the day, there's thinking about these teams as a fan, which I am, and thinking about them as a form of entertainment. And then there's what the city has to also think about, which is that these are businesses, and these businesses create economic benefit for our city, and we want them in our city for that reason also. But those businesses, because they are businesses, have considerations of their own. These are family-owned businesses with generational wealth involved in all of them, and they are making decisions that are best for their business. And so what I'm always having to be mindful of, and what I think everybody else needs to sort of wake up to, is that the sports industry is changing, the business of sports is changing, and these teams are looking for different things than they were looking at and for 30 years ago. It's not just a landlord-tenant situation anymore, which is, the city is a landlord, it owns a stadium or an arena. Can you come up with good enough lease terms to keep your professional sports team playing in your facility? There's a lot of issues now related to these sports teams wanting to be in a multiplicity of businesses. Everything from retail development and stores and restaurants to hotels to gaming, all kinds of things now. And so they're looking at a bigger picture than they were before. And so it's a very complex conversation. And it's not all about, and this is what folks need to realize, it's not all about how bad do you want this team to be here? Do you love your Stars? Do you love your Mavericks? It's what are they looking for, and where can they find it in a way that meets their needs? And so a certain amount of negotiation is going to have to take place at that point. But right now, there is a dispute between the Mavericks and the Stars that has nothing to do with the city of Dallas. That's not an issue with us. That's a business dispute that's in a business court for a reason, and they are having that dispute play out in court. That has nothing to do with us, but when they have resolved that, and hopefully that gets resolved quickly and amicably as soon as possible, we have to decide what we're going to do with the American Airlines Center and how that's going to play out. So, and we'll be ready to do that, and we've been doing that. We've been having those conversations.
You want them to stay?
Absolutely want them to stay. But I also understand that they are running businesses, and I respect that. But we are going to do everything we can to compete. And I think people also need to be aware of that cities are competing for these entities.
DART.
Yes.
Plano, Highland Park, we've got Farmers Branch and Irving are all considering withdrawing from the agency. How concerning is that to you as the mayor of Dallas, where DART is obviously a big player?
It's a concern, but again, I think there's like a theme here. I don't know if you're seeing the thread between all the topics we've been discussing. At the end of the day, entities are doing what's in their perceived best interest. This is the reality of existing in a competitive environment. It comes down to money, and it comes down to control. And what I'm getting at with DART and connecting to these other topics is we, as the city of Dallas, obviously have a lot invested in DART, and we want DART to succeed. The region benefits, I believe, from having DART. But clearly there are some entities that are member cities in DART who have a different take on the current funding mix and the current governing structure. They obviously do, or they wouldn't be having this discussion right now about going to the voters about withdrawing. So what I think where that leaves us is this. Those entities have to make a decision, and I have an opinion about what I think that decision ought to be for the time being, but I don't get to make that decision for them because I'm not the mayor of their towns, and I respect those mayors and those city councils who have to make this decision. But they have to decide whether or not they can simultaneously, and I don't think they can, work and negotiate towards a outcome that is actually mutually beneficial and that gets them the terms that would be good for them and for their residents financially and the governance structure they would like, while they're also going through the motions of withdrawing from the organization. In other words, I'm not sure you can actually be a good faith negotiator towards a better outcome and a solution for a collective if you're also at the same time entertaining leaving the collective. I think they have to make a choice there, and I would think that the right choice for everyone, and including them, would be to give the negotiations a little more time to see if they can get what they are trying to achieve for their residents in terms of transit and at the cost and with the governance structure that meets their needs before they go this route. I just think it could be a hasty decision. And so that's my honest opinion about that, is that you can't do both at the same time. You can't be negotiating a possible better future with these partners and at the same time talking about leaving your partner. So I would suggest that they actually stay at the negotiating table and work with the other member cities to try to make this work for everyone. I also think, though, that DART has to, accept that this is a wake-up call to them. They've got to do a better job of creating value for all the member cities.
Dallas Mayor Eric Johnson, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.